I feel like I have these aha moments or realizations that really open my eyes to certain truths and really transform the way that I see the world and think. But even in having those moments, it's not like my life entirely changes. It's not like I'm perfectly embodying that new knowledge and that new awakening. It's like there's this transition where I'm so aware of it in my mind, but I still notice all of my old ways come up, and I still notice all of my old habits and beliefs come up that might go against that realization and that new truth that I'm aware of. And in this episode, I'm calling this period the in between. And this represents that period of understanding a truth in our minds and opening our eyes to a new truth that might go against old beliefs, right? And change the way that we see the world. But we're not yet embodying that truth. We're not yet fully living as that person that acts that way, that acts in alignment with that new knowledge. And this in between period is exactly what we're going to dive into in today's episode. I'm going to share with you the ways the in between has serviced in my life and how embracing the in between can help us understand that nothing happens overnight. And it's important to understand and embrace this in between period in our journeys, in this life journey, in this growth journey, spiritual journey, whatever journey you're navigating. There are in betweens left and right. And hopefully after this episode, you'll be able to identify all of the in betweens in your life. But before we dive in, if you are not already, press follow wherever you are listening to Fulfilled to tune into weekly episodes for personal stories, lessons, and wisdom to make you feel less alone on your journey and really live your life to the fullest. All right, let's get to it. So there was this one man that I met in Bali. He's an artist, and I ended up becoming friends with him, and we had a lot of really wonderful conversations. And he was walking me through his artwork one day when I stopped at his gallery, and this one piece specifically was about the Buddha and the Buddha's story. And I'm sure that I've heard the Buddha's story a while back, years ago, but he really reminded me of the beautiful message behind his story, or maybe told it to me for the first time. I don't really know. But the story goes supposedly, and I'll try to get it as right as possible here because I haven't really fully immersed myself in it, but supposedly he actually spent 7 weeks meditating on everything that he's learned before reemerging into the world. The Buddha was fully enlightened and awakened. He was aware of all these truths and realizations about life, about the purpose and meaning of life. And after waking up from this enlightenment, and once he did emerge into the world and come back as a human, the liberation process was him implementing these learnings into a new way of being. And this way is called the middle way, which I'm actually going to do a whole nother episode on because it's such a beautiful and cool thing. And I think a big secret to life. So ultimately, what this story shows is that even though the Buddha woke up, quote, awakened and enlightened, even though he was aware of all of these new truths and beautiful insights and realizations, there was still a massive in-between where there was 7 weeks of him just processing everything that he's learned to kind of fully understand them. And then after that, a lifelong liberation of actually embodying those truths that he's learned. It's not like he woke up and suddenly was fully embodying and able to perfectly represent everything he's learned. It wasn't an overnight change. He woke up knowing all of these things, but the actual embodiment and actually incorporating them into his life took a lifetime. And that was after 7 weeks of just even meditating on it. And I really, really love this story for a couple of reasons. The first, there's this distinction between enlightenment and awakening, like opening our minds to the truth of something, and then the liberation, which is actually incorporating that truth and that new lesson and meaning into our life. And at least personally, I never fully understood this distinction until I heard this story. And then it opened this whole doorway to all of the ways that I found it to be so applicable to my life and hopefully to a lot of your lives as well. We can learn as much as we want. We can read all the books, gain all the wisdom, gain all the lessons, and we can know it, but that doesn't set us free. It's not in the knowing, it's in the actual embodiment, and it's in actually living in alignment with these new truths, with these new lessons, and with these new insights. And that's what leads me back to the in-between, because we might know something now. We might know something to be true, But that doesn't mean that the second we learn it, we're perfectly embodying it and we're perfectly able to just do it, to just live that way, to just entirely transform overnight. There is always an in-between. Even for the Buddha, who's this perfect spiritual figure, even he needs that in-between. And I think that there's a couple reasons for this in-between. The first is we have all of our infinite wiring and subconscious way of thinking to unlearn. So old thoughts, old patterns, old tendencies are always going to resurface, even though we now know something else to be true. All of the old beliefs that we might not now see as true or aligned, and the old habits and the old patterns, they're still there. Just because we know something to be true doesn't mean that we can immediately snap our fingers and all of the old ways go away. There's rewiring, there's unlearning, there's learning how to incorporate this new truth in our life. Okay, a specific example, right? Let's think of any new habit that we want to incorporate. It's not like we can snap our fingers and suddenly we just perfectly incorporate that habit and get rid of any old bad habits. One thing in my life that's always felt very, very difficult and impossible is I've always bit my nails. And every single year for Lent growing up, I would give up biting my nails as if like, okay, if I give it up for Lent, I'll be able to just perfectly not bite my nails. Like easy, right? No, it's like I know in my mind, don't bite your nails. You gave up for Lent biting your nails. You should not bite your nails. But then the habitual part of me and the wiring within me that was so used to biting my nails would find herself continuing to bite her nails. And then I would become aware of it and then remind myself like, nope, we're not biting our nails. But this goes for any habit that we want to incorporate in our life. We might be telling ourselves up here, we're not supposed to be doing that. We're going to do this instead. But it takes unlearning. There's that in between where we're incorporating the new habit in our life while rewiring ourselves to let go of the old ways. But that never looks like an overnight change. It might take a month. It might take a year. It might take a lifetime if certain things are really ingrained within us. There are certain things that are lifelong journeys and lifelong in-between periods. And that's why they say like it takes at least 21 days to incorporate a new habit, right? Because it's not like you can just decide, I'm going to incorporate that new habit and get rid of all these bad ones and then wake up the next day and do it. You can do it, but it'll feel difficult and you'll notice other things resurfacing because it's that in-between period. It's that period of incorporating the new knowledge and the new way that we want to be living while unlearning the old. So what habit comes to mind for you, right? For me, it's nail biting and probably a million others, but maybe it's you don't want to go on your phone first thing in the morning when you wake up, but you've been doing it for years now. Like you can't remember the last time you woke up and didn't check your phone. You're not going to just be able to wake up the next morning and not have that urge to check your phone. You know, it's going to take time. It's going to take maybe other precautions like not having your phone right next to you when you wake up. But that is the in-between. And there's another beautiful part of this in-between, and specifically the story of the Buddha as well, that I want to touch on. The 7 weeks of meditation. He wasn't even actually ready to apply the things he's learned until he's meditated on it for 7 weeks. And so this brings another beautiful aspect to this in-between period of before even maybe implementing the habit, we need to mentally get there. We need to be able to process that truth before we can feel deep down that we're ready for it. And what comes to mind for me is one of my best friends said a few years ago, it's always stuck with me, like she was about to end things with an ex-boyfriend of hers. And we were catching up and chatting. And I was like, so are you going to do it? You've been talking about it? And she said something along the lines of like, I know I'm going to, I'm just not fully there yet. You know, it's like she kind of knew that it was coming to an end, but she was kind of still processing that. And she was assessing when that right time was. And so I thought that was another kind of beautiful integration from this story that we might know something to be true. And we might know that we want our lives to go in a certain direction, but there also might be a period where we kind of let ourselves process that, where we kind of let that truth set in and maybe get an understanding of like what we want that to look like before just going full speed ahead and taking steps forward. There can be that contemplation and processing even before the period of in between when we're actually incorporating and then doing the unlearning. And I think that's a beautiful part of this kind of awakening and embodying process as well. Like we're allowed to give ourselves time to process this change also and know deep down when we're ready to then enter that liberation, then actually take steps to incorporate it into our lives and embody that person who acts in alignment with that truth and with that new way of living. And for me personally, what understanding this in-between period does is it gives myself permission to not need to rush results, to not need to put this pressure on myself to perfectly embody something so quickly. Quick little interruption here. If you notice yourself navigating these in-betweens, if you find it hard to embody these things that you're learning and notice that that's keeping you stuck in your old ways, I'm now working one-on-one with clients in my life coaching practice. And if you feel called to connect with me to explore this a little bit more, see what it's all about, check out my website linked below. Book a free session with me to open your eyes to all the amazing ways you can step into your full potential and all of the awesome changes that you want to make in your life. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Like, again, back when I would have these amazing realizations, and I had a lot of them when I was in Bali, I noticed like, okay, the next day I almost expected to just like be transformed in this certain way because I like saw the world in this different light and I like heard these truths that like really struck me to my core. And I almost wanted them to like change me overnight because like, okay, now I know this is the better way to be living and I can let go of the old ways that I was living that weren't serving me. But it doesn't happen like that. Like the next day, of course, the old ways would resurface. Again, the old programming and old wiring still comes up. But now in understanding like this is the in-between period, this is the transition period, this is the integration period, maybe even that processing period, I can accept that the old ways will resurface. But every time they do, it's an opportunity for me to remind myself, oh, actually, this is the new way I want to be living. This is the new habit I want to incorporate. This is that new belief I want to replace with that. It's taking that pressure off myself to need to embody it right away and need to rush the growth process and the setting myself free of the old ways process. Because I think depending on the depth of how much our old beliefs and our old habits are ingrained within us and how maybe difficult this new truth and realization and habit is to incorporate in our life, I think the in-between period can last anywhere from a month to a lifetime. And we don't need to know the timeline or put pressure on a timeline for it. So understanding this in-between, that every single one of us experienced, this beautiful transition of incorporating the knowledge that we learned into our life through embodiment, through taking action, through unlearning and relearning, we can take the pressure off. We can remind ourselves that there's no rush to be that new version overnight. Because every time that we choose that new way of thinking, every time that we choose the new belief, incorporate the new habit, implement this learning into who we show up as in this life, that is the growth and that is the process and that is the liberation. And it doesn't happen all at once. So this is the in-between. Whatever in-between you're in right now, even the Buddha experienced it. So give yourself some grace and embrace being in the in-between, embrace the messiness and everything that you're feeling along the way. And know that if old things come up, that doesn't mean that you're also not actively incorporating all of these new ways of being and lessons and insights that we're learning. Both will surface, and that's a beautiful thing. So hope you enjoyed this episode about the in-between and embodying the beautiful lessons that we're learning along the way. If you did, don't forget to press follow or subscribe wherever you are listening to Fulfilled. And I'll see you all again soon on your journeys to truly living this life fully.